We also have our staff people and the CEO from Regional District Finance. The agenda as presented. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried.
Item 2B, Council Workshop, Budget Process Overview. The capital budget presentations by management are directly following a committee of the whole meeting. Moving on to our registered petitions and delegations. First off, we have the funding request for coordination and implementation of Kettle River Watershed Management Plan. Jessica Mason, Coordinator, Kettle River Watershed Authority. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thanks.
Yes, it took a while. The roads aren't good.
What was that comment?
Yeah.
Right. Actually. Okay, so what's that?
Sorry,
Yeah, I think the audio's on. Yeah. Oh, there's no audio.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, there's no audio on the presentation. Okay, so my name's Jessica Mace. I'm the coordinator for the Kettle River Watershed Authority. And this is my co-worker, Nicole McCallum, who works with me. So I think I just have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and be succinct. So I'll give a little background information. Rolly Russell is going to help me with that because he has been there from, I think, pretty well from the beginning. And then I'm going to talk about the work that we've done in 2017, what's going on in the watershed, including, of course, the flood and the drought that happened in the past year, and kind of what the work is that we've done. And then I'll
strategy for as well. So how do we best plan and also the implementation of those pieces. So it's okay on that is really trying to recognize the plan and make sure that we're as a value of command and as local governments to the boundaries. So that's not and demonstrate that at the provincial level, for example, we have a lot more traction in terms of having that local control over watershed management. So that's I would say at this point I have really any questions afterwards. So this for budget has been primarily from the areas with several contributions from some of their folks and the municipalities over the years. So coming back to just to talk a little bit about some of the watershed and the past year and the work that we did. is average snowpack over a year. So, and the green is 2017. And so, in 2017, I just found was because the snowpack was normal right until April, and basically it started raining in April, and the numbers started raining, it snowed, and it started like every night in May, was there. And so precipitation led to an increase in the snowpack, which led to melting, and then we had the flood after that. So it's just to show that, you need to prepare, and then it's coming. So to think about is important. This is a couple of hours in Johnson's plans of the flooding that happened down there, and also what we did during the flood. There was an emergency response team out of the regional district office, and someone was there in the district, the fire chief. Crazy busy because it was flooding here and it was flooding on the neighborhood, but the street was collapsing, and so it wasn't pushing people on back, but we were using this neighborhood for the bad. She was able to talk to people and touch around with someone to make it stop. So I was being brought to the regional district. Some people don't realize it, but so we were able to go to these neighborhood meetings and speak with people, and we were received really well. People were really appreciative, and we passed on various information. So I think
that was something that we tried to do that was helpful. And then I'll move right into the drought. So of course we know we had the flood last year, and then we also had the drought. The main thing, I guess, that happened last year, again, was it was really reactionary too, right? Like it wasn't expected because we had the big flood in the spring. You don't expect it. You're not really prepared for it. The province really didn't give us any, notice. They didn't really talk to us. They hadn't kind of pulled us into their meetings yet. And then finally in August, the province had actually put the Kettle River Watershed on a level 3 drought by the middle of August, but they didn't tell us, right? There was no, and I mean, the reason they didn't tell us, they said, was because they were so busy with the forest fires that they didn't have time, basically, or the capacity. But, if we knew about it earlier, we could have done something about it. And so basically we kind of caught up to them eventually. And, once we did catch up to them, we were invited to participate in kind of these provincial drought calls. And that's when we called, like Graham participated with me on the call. And then we were able to promote that right away to the community and to get people to conserve water, and think about, we are in a drought. We need to cut back. And so also, I just wanted to mention that through social media, we put stuff on our Facebook page, and we got over 3,600 hits on those drought posts. And then I know Graham was on the radio. We were in the newspaper, like between the city and the regional district. I really think we reached a lot of people, which was great. Most people that I talked to, knew about it already. It wasn't something new. And I guess the biggest problem that happened was, of course, we weren't plugged in earlier. And that's what we are expecting from getting this drought response plan in place. But I'll talk about that in a minute. The other work that we did over the past year, I know you guys were wondering about that because Frank mentioned that to me, that you were, it's like, what do those guys do up there? So we respond to, I feel like, to emergencies, but then we also are trying to do just general public engagement and education. So we were at education booths across the boundary, and 4 in Grand Forks, but also Rock Creek, Christina Lake, reaching out to people. And people really have questions like that. We're talking about the watershed. We might be talking about how much you should water your grass, or what you can do to cut back during the drought. It's all different things. So I think it's good for us to be out there, and people have, again, like a face that they can talk to and ask questions to. The other thing that we did was try to help people get their wells license. So under the new Water Sustainability Act, you need to get your groundwater license. Or you need to apply for a license. So basically we ran workshops, and those were well attended, and people were able to walk away at their wells. They had their application in. So I think that was successful. And And now I'll just talk about what we're planning for the next year. Over this next year, we, like I mentioned, we want to get this regional drought response plan in place. And the key to it is that it's a coordinated response. And this is what the province has really like expressed to me that they want to see. They want to see, because I know the city of Grand Forks has, you know, a drought plan in place and you guys have different things that you do, but they really want to see it on a regional level. And so that's what we are trying to do here. And the other key thing with it is that, you know, we don't want somebody in Kamloops and someone in Penticton like calling us to tell us that we're in a drought. To me, I was like, we don't need them to tell us. Like, we know, right? We know when the water's low. So through this drought plan, we can develop our own like local triggers. You know, when is the water too low, and what are we going to do about it? And then, anyway, there I just want to show the funding is really wide ranging. That we've had lots of people committed to it and want to be a part of it. So that's great. Here, this picture is pretty interesting. I find it's Boundary Creek in September. How it completely dried up in parts. And then the last part that I'll touch on is just the flood preparedness outreach. That is something else that we would like to work on this year. And we were, you know, thinking it would be a great thing to have a partnership between the city, the regional district, and the Real Estate Foundation is a granting organization. So this is kind of the perfect sort of work that they will provide a grant for. So but only about 50%. So if we can get funds in place, committed, then we can leverage that and get the grant hopefully. So, and this is where the request kind of comes in for $5,000 for program development. So that would be really to make sure the city, the regional district, that everyone's happy with what we're going to produce. And then the $10,000 would be for the actual implementation of the program. That's it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a question on the private wells. They have to be licensed. There will likely be some that won't apply for a license. How do you intend to handle those situations?
Yeah, so it's not, for one, it's not domestic well owners, so households don't have to apply for a license, so that's key, right? So it's more, they're looking at the bigger users, you know, the people that irrigate their crops or have a business where they use a lot of water, so they really want the non-domestic people to get their wells licensed. I guess the best thing that's happened is they extended the deadline. They had a deadline set for the end of 2017, and you were going to have to pay an application fee after that. But anyway, now, so they've extended that deadline. You don't have to pay an application fee, which is great. So it's still free to apply. You will have to pay an annual fee, but the annual fee generally has only been about $50. So people aren't too unhappy with that. I think they were worried it was going to be more. But yeah, we are going to try and reach out to people as much as possible over the next year. We have a deadline now of March 1st, 2019. Yeah.
Thank you, because that wasn't clear on the domestic.
Yes.
It wasn't clear.
Yeah.
Councilor Butler, then Director Rosen.
Thanks, Jessica. I enjoyed speaking with you the other day and hearing your presentation as well. And I think it's awesome that we're helping people to register their wells, because it's something that's been implemented by the provincial government with not a lot of support for people on how to do it. And from what you told me, it was quite an onerous process. People were taking up to 2 to 3 hours online and not really knowing how to walk through it. So these workshops, I'm sure, have been very helpful for people. I would like to see the provincial government paying for those workshops, because they're the ones implementing the program and they need to provide the funding for the program that they're implementing. Which brings me to my question. With your Kettle River Watershed Authority and the implementation of this program, where did the funding come from originally for this, and where are your funding sources coming from now? It looks like, from what you presented, that the $15,000 is just for the flood response plan, and I'm wondering, is there other funding to complete the drought management plan?
The drought management plan, I think that we have enough funding in place now from the water suppliers are providing a bit, and then the the city and the community forest in Greenwood and Midway. They're trying to support some environmental projects around, water or whatever. And then the gas tax funds from the regional district are kind of bumping up the rest of that. So we'll be able to complete that with the money we have in place or committed, I guess. But do you mean historically where the money has come from, or just for this year coming up?
Yeah, historically and ongoing, there's other points to the Kettle River Watershed Management Plan for implementation that Rolly talked about, and I'm just wondering as we move forward, where you see that funding coming from.
Do you want to talk?
Sure. So historically, since the beginning of when the concept was first hatched, in terms of like the technical reports and so on, the bulk of that funding has come from through the rural areas through gas tax funding, and so I don't know. Mark might have a better sense than me in terms of the specific breakdown, but over the span of the last 8 years. It would be on the order, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars that run into it. And I think probably about 60,000, give or take, has come from municipalities, and the remainder of that has come from the gas tax through electoral areas.
And looking forward?
So that's a bigger question. And that's what we've been, so we essentially have tried to establish funding through for some of these project specific pieces throughout this calendar year, essentially. But the vision is that we have to come up with a longer term kind of sustainable funding model. And that's been the challenge. So we've been petitioning the province, because as you said, that was what I was going to speak to initially, was that well, to be clear, that well licensing piece, that's a provincial mandate. And we're trying to help the local people navigate that process that the province has mandated. That being said, we're doing a bunch of the work that the province is supposed to be doing essentially there, right? And they've been helping with that, but they also, through conversations at UBCM with various ministry people at a number of different sessions too, I think they recognize how much of their work is being helped by what we're doing. And so they, in terms of funding, we've been going to them and saying, look, we recognize this is going to be a better arrangement for you as well as for us if we can make this develop properly. So help us. So either help us, you figure out how to do that, whether that's staffing or whether that's financially, come to the table. And so we're still waiting on them to initiate we were supposed to have a meeting in December. That didn't happen, but we'll hopefully have a meeting soon with them and establish that. And then it's up to us through, the city of Grand Forks and rural Grand Forks and the rest of the boundary local government to try to figure out what that arrangement is going to look like in terms of sustainable funding moving forward. So that's the question then. At that point, do we try to establish another service to the regional district? What does that look like? What do we need to get out of that? How does that relate to things like our agricultural plan as well? There's a lot of questions to work through there.
Did that encompass your?
Yes, my initial was just to speak to that point to make sure it's clear that the well licensing thing is a provincial mandate that we're helping with. The province is quite pleased, and we've gone back to them and said, look, if we're going to do this again, because now it's extended, you should be funding this beyond just providing this staff person to those sessions. And so, and they haven't answered that in affirmative, but they have said, it sounds promising to me. Basically, they haven't committed, but it sounds like they recognize the value here. I think in terms of having a better partnership with a local body that is engaged with watershed management means that their energy is going to be more effective as well.
Thank you, Director Russell. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, so just to be clear then, the 15,000 that you are requesting would be for the flood management part of the program. And then the other question would be, I'm wondering if you know, just off the top of your head, how much Grand Forks has contributed already to your program? May not be for this particular piece, but it could be to the Kettle River watershed management as a whole.
So lately, you guys put in $1,000 to kind of finish off the contract that the regional district had with me. So that was that $1,000 that you approved. It was because it was a 3-year contract. The money was put in place by the regional directors through the gas tax funding to cover that 3 years, but they didn't put in money for disbursements because they didn't know how much they would be. So the travel, meals, any meeting costs, like we set up a meeting, room rental, and we provide dinner sometimes. So the regional district always knew they'd have to go back and ask for, maybe it was, I think, only $6,000 or something to put into that pot to kind of complete the contract. So that's what that $1,000 was. It was basically shared between you guys, Midway, the 3 directors, and Greenwood, which was great. And then you've also put the $1,500 into the drought management plan that's coming up, which was great because we really only, we were asking water suppliers to help out, and anyway, it's good. Yeah. But historically, I don't think a lot. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
You do as well.
There was a flow-through grant from the RDKB, I believe it was in 2011. Flood mitigation, flood hazard mitigation stuff that flowed through the project and contributed directly to part of the Kettle River Watershed Plan. And then there was, I think, riparian threat assessment did have a couple of thousand, I think, from the city. Yeah.
The original one, the original contribution that the grant mentioned, I think, was $10,000. So probably historically, other than the contributions that Jessica has raised, around $12,000. The bulk of the base funding has come through electoral area gas tax revenue.
Councilor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, another question. Just how do you think that people's general level of education is after what happened last year? I know I was down at the post office, and there it was really great. They had a lot of information posted on a bulletin board down there. I know the city was very involved in that. Van Heinrich was down there a fair bit, and I know other staff people were too. So I'm just wondering, how do you feel about the level of education of the general area as a whole, and certainly people who live in the area that was flooded?
I feel like it's getting better. I mean, Nicole spent a lot of time out at the, working out with the public, and we had repeat customers. People would come, and then they'd come back at another event and be like, "Oh, you guys are here too," and they'd have more questions. So I think people are getting used to seeing us. I don't think we've been in the public. Graham was my predecessor, right? And so he did a lot of meetings and whatnot, but I don't know that you ran a lot of public booths, that people could feel free to come and talk. And so I think that's been helpful. We've really only done that over the last year. So I think there's still a lot to learn probably for people. With the flood preparedness, I'd say it's better, right? Because people now are like, oh, I do. Some people didn't even know they lived in a floodplain because it hadn't flooded for 20 years and they only bought their house, 10 years ago or something like that, So that was, I think, kind of upsetting for people, but I'm still not sure how much they know about to be prepared. And there's other work, I think, to be done, like even thinking about your property. If you live in a floodplain, what are you storing on your property? Because even we walked down to the beach under the Black Train Bridge there, and there's these huge gallons, 45-gallon drums. They could have oil, they could have gasoline in them, and that's in the river system now. And so I think there's some work there to be done, getting to people kind of think of what is on my property and can that contaminate the river if there's a flood again. And then also reminding people that even if a flood's not forecasted, it could still come, and we need to be ready, at a certain time of year. Yeah. So I think there's definitely room for education.
Thank you. You answered that really well. Thank you. It's helpful.
Do we have any other questions? Hearing none. No.
I just Just one quick comment too on some of these pieces. I think it's also important to highlight that the regional district now, like, so Jessica spoke a little bit about the activation of the Emergency Operations Center, right? The regional district also now, we have a manager for emergency programs, and we have a corporate communications officer. The titles they're new positions, so I keep stumbling on the titles. So just also to make sure we're clear, there's distinction between those kind of acute education and response pieces and the more chronic, longer standing pieces. And so the trying to navigate and establish what those look like. So the difference between, what happens when we're in a flood situation and we need to be educating and communicating versus what's happening in the months or the year prior sort of thing. So just to make sure we're clear that we're talking about also making sure that those communications all fit together and dovetail nicely.
How's about it?
Thanks. Yeah, I think moving forward, it would be helpful for me if it was possible if you're able to provide to us the pieces that you're still going to be working on, how many years you see that taking, and your estimated budget for those projects coming up, so that we know we can see a light at the end of the tunnel to the funding request, and that we know overall how much the implementation of the program is going to cost. I also like the fact that we're able to have more local control over our watershed, that hopefully the province will get comfortable with working with you and realize that when we have issues that they can come to you and that you can take over for them rather than having them just implement stuff. Because you had mentioned to me that beginning of September, when they came down with that, oh my goodness, we're in a drought force situation, that they sent letters out to certain users saying you need to reduce your water consumption by 100%. In other words, turn off your taps. Like, wow, people just can't do that. And we need somebody like yourself at a local level that can implement things a bit more quickly and communicate with people. So I do like having you there to do that, and hopefully as we move forward, the province can allow us to have more freedom and more local control over our watershed.
I know that wasn't a question, but the only thing I'll say about it is that's really what they've expressed to me, is that if we have this regional drought, response and drought management plan in place, that they will respect us, and that they can see that we're trying to cut back. And I said, "Are you going to stop sending those letters?" Like, we've shown that we are cutting back, voluntarily. And the other terrible thing about those letters is there was they misspelled, or they didn't misspell, they put in the wrong word. They sent these letters out to people and it said, "You live in the Similkameen watershed." I was like, oh, if they only let me edit that. Like, clearly I would have seen that, and I could have fixed it so that, that just shows. I mean, who's gonna do that, right? Like, if they get a letter like that, it's misspelled, it's from someone from the province from who knows where. Whereas if we're talking to people and trying to, plan ahead and get people on board ahead of time, like, I think it'll be more successful also.
Do we have any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to receive for information of the delegation from the Kettle River Watershed Authority and refer the funding request of the $15,000 to the 2018 budgeting process. Councillor Ross. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 3B. Subject matter is the request to rescind the six-month eviction notice for the 7212 Riverside Drive, Whispers of Hope. May I have a motion to receive the information, the delegation presentation from Whispers of Hope and Eviction Association. Councillor Ross. Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Melissa Scholga. I represent Whispers of Hope Benevolence Association. I am here requesting that the notice of eviction for 7212 Riverside Avenue be rescinded, and that the agreements of our original lease be adhered to, allowing us to stay until June of this year. You all likely know that we are a community kitchen and a thrift store We are also a drop-in center and an advocate for those in our community who are most in need. In addition to the meals that we provide a space for qualified individuals to come in and provide services as a form of outreach to our citizens. We also provide employment and work experience opportunities to many people who are facing barriers otherwise to that. This has solidified ourselves as quite a safety net for the community. We're able to foster community connections with those who can't find them otherwise. And I think our services have become quite integral. We tend to act as a bit of a filter for many agencies to be able to provide support. Community donations, volunteer efforts, and service providers all come together to provide relief of poverty and harm reduction to those who are needing it. We actually have a diverse amount of supporters, many people in the community, food bank and hamper programs, the Resource Center, Mental Health and Addictions, Anchors, Community Futures, Blessings Boutique, the local Legion branch. We also have the grocery stores and many farmers all pitching in to provide whatever resources or support they can in the most meaningful way to ensure it gets to those in need. Our meal numbers for this last year have actually increased significantly, and we believe that the reliance on our services has become more important. We actually see some of our numbers correlate to other services being provided. So when income assistance or other food hamper programs are in place, our numbers actually do go down. And we think this indicates that there isn't a lot of abuse of our services, that people really do only reach out when they are in need. And we'd like to point out that we actually believe our area is going through a bit of a food crisis, and many other agencies involved would likely share the same concerns. We have costs of living increasing and little support available to people. I've also noticed through our socioeconomic reports coming out that many of our residents are experiencing worst case need, and we're seeing that on a daily basis. To give you an idea of the year for us, there were actually many large events and obstacles that we were faced with. Starting as early as April, we received our first concerns about the campers alongside the property. And we worked very closely with bylaw enforcement and whichever staff to ensure that pathways were maintained and that the property was clear. As of June, we actually had our coordinator of 5 years leave the position for another job. And that's difficult for any organization to navigate. And at that time, we actually believed that we were compliant with any and all bylaws and expectations because we didn't receive any other correspondence suggesting otherwise. In July, we experienced another change in management, and we also had some of our major food suppliers withdraw their donations. This was a huge impact on our operations. In August, we received the first notice to cease operations. And unfortunately, I think that has set a big tone with our organization and council as one of non-compliance. And unfortunately, our organization did see that 2-day notice as unreasonable and not compliant with our lease, and hence why we did push back. Otherwise, I'd like to stress that we have been working very closely to ensure that we are meeting standards and expectations in place. When we did receive the official eviction notice, it did give us a lot better insight as to the concerns being shared, although many of them were quite vague and led us to make a lot of assumptions. At that time, we had also already advertised that our bottle recycling bins were going to be removed from the location, and we believe that that added to some of the unsightliness being experienced because we were unable to deal with the volume coming in from that. At that time, we also did acquire permits for our storage containers and had them painted to ensure that they were, again, keeping up with sightly premises. As of September, I was hired, and that also allowed some consistency in staff to ensure that any donations dropped off after hours, any other messes could easily be handled in a timely manner, and we could keep up appearances better. At that time, we also believed that we were compliant with bylaws. In August, as part of the eviction notice, we were told we had 30 days to comply with those bylaws. And without, again, having received any other correspondence, we thought we were sufficient in that. We also started working a lot closer with the Boundary Resource Center, formerly known as the Boundary Women's Resource Center. We believe that if we work together to find a location, we likely can provide services together and a more well-rounded service to our guests and clientele. As of October, with the Beth Shelter reopening, we actually saw a lot less pressure on those concerns to do with the campers, and they had a little bit more options available to them. And unfortunately, we had the passing of one of our dear guests, a citizen who was living on the streets in our community, and that kind of rocked our establishment as well. At that time, we did have fire inspection done, and we worked very closely with the chief to ensure every aspect that we could was adhered to. We had a company come in and ensure our fire alarm system was in good working order, as well as our extinguishers. It was very difficult for us to find a company to come in and do service for our ventilation system, but I'm happy to announce that as of this weekend, we actually have completed that work and it has been signed off upon. So I believe we're totally compliant with our expectations from the fire chief at this time. And then lastly, in November, we did have another major supply cut off, which was our bread supply. But thankfully, it's given us the opportunity to work a lot closer with our local food bank, and they've actually stepped up. So any product that they're unable to use or that they've rotated through, we're receiving. So it's kind of fostered a stronger relationship there. In terms of the eviction notice given, I mentioned that there were bylaws suggested that we were infracted upon and that we addressed what we could. There were some aspects such as noise and sounds disturbing the peace, allowing waste, spoilage, or damage, and nuisance and annoyance to adjoining properties. We actually felt very strongly, and in working with our neighbors, that those complaints were more attributed to the actual homeless camp and the behaviors of the individuals within it. And it is very difficult for us to manage or even mitigate any of those behaviors outside of our leased property and outside of our operating hours. I wanted to comment because we've had a lot of questions about what our organization does to reduce crime in our area. And I believe that even our existence itself actually alleviates a lot of crime out of necessity. When somebody is hungry, when they don't have appropriate shoes on their feet, they're less likely to shoplift when they are given an option to them. We also were able to reiterate to many citizens that we do have rules in place and expected behavior on the property. We have the same concerns as any public washroom would have in terms of potential for drug use. And we actually believe that by having people there and monitoring the washrooms, that we can actually confront people on behavior we think is inappropriate, and we can actually go further to guide them to what resources may be available to help them. What's amazing is our drop-ins on Wednesday, being able to have a professional there. I can consult the group about any shared concerns of behavior that's been going on, and somebody there is able to talk about what resources and alternatives might be available for those people. I found that incredibly helpful. We also had concerns brought up by the fire chief recently, and I hope that we've addressed those, and I can go into that further with him. And unfortunately, concerns brought forward by the manager of building inspections were not actually made clear to us. So I believe his walkabout was in October. He has some concerns to do with the electrical setup, and the only way we've actually heard about this is through public notices. And that's a bit of a trend, unfortunately. Oftentimes we only hear about these concerns when it's been made aware to the public, and there is misinformation. So it makes it a lot more difficult in terms of our public relations to clarify our situation when we're having to address it with every individual that comes to inquire. So I'd really like to work closer with the city to address those concerns and alleviate them, because many times it's a non-issue. Of course, I wouldn't be here today if we had a location alternative in place within the given timeline. We have many factors to consider, including square footage, available parking nearby, infrastructure, and utilities available to accommodate the commercial kitchen. And we've looked within the downtown core as well as out in the industrial area and as far as the recreational area, and nothing is proven to be suitable. We think that we are at a bigger advantage now working with other agencies and stakeholders to find a location and perhaps to bring resources together to operate as one in the facility. So we would just like more opportunity to explore those and find something suitable. I think, you know, we've been aware of our lease being up for several years, at least as far as I was involved on the board. And it's something that we've discussed, we've looked around at. Now, I wouldn't say we're looking more seriously, I'd say we're looking more frantically. And I'm concerned that we're going to make rush decisions and that honestly that our guests will suffer in that our services may not be able to be as robust or even cover the needs that are being experienced. I also just wanted to mention that there is a feasibility study coming underway through Community Futures talking about a community hub. So there's lots of work underway talking about not only the types of services we provide, such as a gathering space and a community kitchen for the public. We're needing those resources to be enhanced upon, to grow. So I'd hate for us to move backwards in the meantime. Again, this is mostly an invitation to work closer with the city. We would like you to be at the table and we can discuss which locations we're looking at, what's appropriate, talk about our strategic planning moving forward into the future. With our harm reduction efforts, our poverty reduction techniques, and our community support, I believe that we are creating a healthier community, and I would invite you all to be a part of that. So to reiterate again, Mr. Mayor, I would like to insist that the eviction notice be rescinded for the 7212 location, allowing us to stick to our original lease. And I implore the councillors and yourself, Mr. Mayor, as stewards of this community, please help us to continue to help others. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just have one question. I have a few other questions which I'll reserve for later after the councillors or anybody else has questions. You keep stating that you have made efforts to find another location. Where and when? Have you any documented places?
Yes. Well, in particular, we were working with a realtor recently. I'm not too sure in terms of privacy of information if I should discuss all the locations. There are many available, even previous locations that we've gone into. I mean, I could definitely make these addresses available to the council outside of this meeting for fear if there is any concern about sharing that information publicly.
And you've also stated about compliance. How long was it in the making? How long did it take till you complied, for instance, with the fire chief regarding the ventilation system?
Mm-hmm.
And you had stated that you were not able to find yet, it's come to my attention, that you were given different options by the fire chief.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did the non-compliance occur? What's the timeline?
The biggest aspect of the non-compliance was to do with the ventilation system. Every other aspect was addressed within the month that the report happened in October. And that was actually more to do with availability of services and contractors. We have nothing in our town or our local area. I actually did have an original date of November 17th booked to have the vents cleaned. And unfortunately, the company was out of Nelson. They had withdrawn due to poor weather and being unable to come across the passes. I also reached out to companies in the Okanagan, and they had said that they have a different cleaning schedule that we would need to get upon, and so that they were unable to come within that timeline. Thankfully, just kind of scouring whatever resources I can, making calls, I was able to find one company that, although they were not taking new clients and don't actually have the capacity for that, given our situation of dire need, made an exception. And like I said, we're able to come out over the weekend, and I was able to have all that completed finally. It's not necessarily to say that we weren't making the effort, it's that there were very limited resources available to us for that professional service.
So at the 11th hour, after 2 months, you finally got it done, which means during those 2 months, you actually put this corporation at risk because we are the landlords. And if anything should have occurred, this corporation would have been at risk, i.e. legal litigation, which transfers to the taxpayers. Secondly, you put your own patrons at risk in that establishment for 2 months. This is a really serious concern on my behalf. You put your own patrons at risk.
I definitely understand and even share those concerns because safety is of the utmost importance to our organization. I believe that in the actions that we could take, the fact that I jumped on them so quickly should hopefully be a testament to my concern for that. And unfortunately, yes, given the period of time and where we weren't presented with any options, it's difficult to say because it does look like there was no action being taken. And unfortunately, I can't really prove otherwise other than getting contacts and making phone calls. I think that thankfully, having reviewed with the contractor the situation and not really knowing much about our ventilation system, I was actually taught a lot more. The filters that we have in place right above the stove are actually installed incorrectly, but in such a way that actually catches all the grease from going up into the vents and therefore requiring a lot more cleaning on our hand. So in some senses, it being set up inappropriately made it less of a fire hazard in the sense that a lot of that grease was being caught right in an area that we were actually able to clean and maintain. And I did inquire with the contractor to see, what level of risk were we at? This has gone far too long. What was the situation? And he said that, of course, it needed to be done. There was actually dust in the system, which was indicative of that, but the grease was quite minimal because of our setup, and we're working closely with him to get that corrected and have implemented a very good cleaning schedule that we're sticking to. So he actually indicated that if there was a grease fire to have happened within that time, that it would do damage to our fan blades and not to any damage to the building at all. I know that's kind of a moot point at this point, but I just want to reiterate that we do share that exact same level of concern. We don't want to put anyone in harm's way, whether it be our staff or our guests, and we do want to work with you guys to ensure that the building is in a safe place to occupy.
Again, with all due respect, that is your perception that it was safe, but 2 months
Right.
being in the industry is unacceptable when you're dealing with the public and public's lives at stake. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. It's my understanding here that we are just receiving this request to rescind the 6-month eviction notice. We're just receiving this for information at this point. I think what I just would like to say is that as I've watched this whole scenario unfold, I'm very saddened by the fact that it's become an adversarial situation as opposed to a collaborative situation, and I think that were information to be communicated, were people to be sitting down at the table and talking over the issues and concerns that both sides have, we could have really mitigated a lot of the bad feeling and the place that we're at now. I absolutely believe in Whispers and Beths, what you do for the community. Every community has people who are marginalized and people who are poor and people who are disenfranchised, and those people need help and support from the community. Unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that Whispers and Beths have aligned themselves, not because of anything that you've done, but just because of proximity, I believe, with the criminal element of the community and with those people who, because of mental health issues and those kinds of things are scaring people in the community and also making people angry. And out of that kind of a knee-jerk reaction, I think people have lost their sense of compassion and just said, well, let's just shut this thing down. Now, we're going to be looking at a resolution that Councillor Ross is bringing to the table in just a couple of items down on the agenda, which will seek to extend to the 1st of May, whether for Whispers to stay open. I don't know where that'll go. I have no idea what the other councillors, how they're going to vote on that. But I would just like to say that I wish you all the best. I know how I'm going to be voting. And yeah, just keep on doing the right thing.
Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross, and Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Your Worship. My major concern is the electrical and the bare wire. And has that had an electrical inspection? Has the electrical inspector come and approved it? And can you provide us with documentation that it's been approved?
I'm not actually aware of any bare wires that would be exposed or a concern. Like I mentioned, the concerns that the manager of building inspection had brought forward were not actually brought to us. And I am not actually a professional on the matter whatsoever. And I would say we're more than open to having a professional come in, assess the situation, and guide us into the actions that may need to be taken to be appropriate. So it's my understanding that no changes to the electrical have been done since we moved in 2013. And I believe that was when we were referenced as having the last building inspection. It's been 5 years. I'm not too sure how regularly it's expected that a building undergo those things, but I would think that we should be held to the same standard as anyone else. And if there is a cost and we are responsible for that, then we'll do our best to accommodate.
May I just interject quickly? You mentioned that you are not aware of any work having been done, but obviously there has been work done. So my simple question to this one is, did you get permission from the landlord to do such work, be it with a professional or a non-professional? This is the main element, because being a tenant, you cannot touch anything on the premise without getting permission first.
I'm definitely aware of the situation, and I have confirmed with the Beth Shelter as well that they have not undergone any electrical changes to the building. So to be honest, I'm at a loss, because I without having an inspection done to confirm if there have been changes, and if so, what, and what needs to be done to correct them, it's hard for me to comment on the scenario.
Have those pictures been forwarded to you regarding the electrical work, to your board?
Sorry, no, actually, we were shared the agenda for today, and that's actually how I found out I was listed on the agenda. I never actually did receive any formal response from anybody, and I have not heard. The only person I've been in contact with has been the fire chief at this point.
But having seen the agenda, you have seen the documentation that accompanied with it. And at that point in time, you are aware of that there were changes, because they were quite evident. Pictures don't lie.
The problem for me is the point of reference. I don't actually know the change because I don't know how it was, and I'm not able to indicate through those pictures that those changes actually were done by us. I'm not trying to argue that we did or did not do something. I'm saying that we definitely would like to look into and find clarity in the situation and correct it. We are on the same page.
Yeah. Torcio and Councillor Ross and Councillor Crowe.
Your Worship, when we got the report back from our current building inspector and of the pictures in that, and so the first thing I did was phone the former building inspector and asked him whether or not he was aware of what had happened. And he said that when he provided the occupancy permit, he would have not provided that permit if the work that with the wires that were outside of the building or outside on the walls without the proper sheathing and everything, he would have never provided the occupancy permit at that time.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, the wording was used as bare wires. It should be termed exposed wires on the surface. Councillor Ross and Councillor Crowe.
Thank you, Melissa. This story is not unusual. I drove across Canada this summer to see family as far as Cape Breton Island, spent quite a bit of time in some small towns in New Brunswick as well, Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario. And as I traveled across Canada, I scanned for CBC News because I'm a news junkie, and I found it quite interesting that I felt like I hadn't left Grand Forks because I was hearing time and time again about issues around homelessness, growing issues around lack of affordability, addictions, mental health, and it's only increased right across the country and indeed globally. I just sort of feel like this is death by a thousand cuts for you guys. And as somebody who actually owns my own home and is a landlord, it's my responsibility to make sure that the place that I'm renting out to an occupant is up to code. And I find it a little appalling and confusing that we would punish you for occupying a building that we own and not having it up to code, and then asking you what you're going to do about it. It's our building, it's our responsibility, and you were given a lease by a previous council. You are occupying that. And what I find appalling and interesting is it's run by people who are paid pretty, not great salaries often. A lot of those people who do that work are women, because that's what we do, and by volunteers. And then we go after you. And we go after the most fragile people in our community. We take food off their plates and we pull blankets off their bodies. I'm hoping that we can debate this today and make this decision. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do and for the people who work alongside you. And I also agree with you that when you take food off people's plates and you pull a blanket off their body, they just become more angry. So these are basic human rights. And just thanks for coming here, and thanks for the work you do, and for the people here today who are volunteers in that organization.
Just a quick comment, Councillor Ross. You had mentioned that you found it appalling that as landlords, we should be responsible and not take it on the tenant. Unfortunately, when the tenant does the work, the city cannot be responsible if we are not aware of what is going on in the premise. Secondly, this discussion today is turning into a social elephant in the room. We have to keep this operational. We are basing this on the lease, the contraventions, and the non-compliance. Let's not deviate into the social aspect of this. This is not the intention of the city.
We have an OCP that actually includes the
Councillor Ross, you're out
social
of order.
element.
Councillor Crog,
You talk about a triple bottom line.
you're out of order, Councillor Ross.
Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Sorry.
You're out of order. I'm out of order.
Thank you. Couple of questions. I think the electrical, or part of it has kind of been addressed. In order to touch an electrical system, you have to either be qualified or have a permit, So somebody went and decided they wanted to put plugs in different areas. So they just wired it themselves, okay, which is illegal and bad, and we all know that, okay? I'm glad to hear that the hood cleaning has been done. A note, and I guess my concern has to do more with insurance and that, because when the hood wasn't done, that could negate your insurance. So for those 2 months, if that was the case, then you wouldn't have had any insurance. Now, my question is, if you are granted retrieval, extended, whatever you want to call it, what is there in place to protect the taxpayers for the city of Grand Forks? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about your insurance. Most people have insurance, and if you're running a kitchen, then, if you poison somebody, if somebody trips over the still, or if somebody gets splashed, that type of thing, that's normal liability insurance, okay? That protects you inside your building. What protects the city from the building, right? So what have you, Is it $2 million liability? Is it 1 million? Is it just that occupancy liability? Is there, like a lot of places will have 5 million and they will name the city as being protected by that. Anytime there's an insurance claim against the city, it can affect the taxpayers and stuff. So what have you got in place and what are your plans when it comes to insurance? I'm guessing, and you could prove me wrong, that the insurance that you have right now is not adequate.
I'll speak to this as best as I can. It's my understanding that our liability insurance is actually quite robust. We did renew our agreement a little while ago. Unfortunately, I don't really know all the details to those. I know we would definitely have well over $1 million in terms of liability, but you're right, I don't know the extent to $1 million, 5 million, what it is and what. I know that we did extend our coverage to include even more thorough, like director's liability. So we've kind of gone a little bit further to look in, where have we been vulnerable and how can we do better coverage? And again, I think this is a great opportunity for us to work closer with the city and their expectations. I would hope that if there was an expectation for our insurance purposes, that perhaps that be listed in our lease as something that we need to adhere to and to ensure this relationship. But I think this is something that we need to work collaboratively on. We don't own the asset of the building. We don't fully understand the true costs behind it, all kinds of things. So I think if there isn't insurance coverage on the city's part and we need to make up for that, that we would work closely together to ensure that there is a system in place. Again, our organization's biggest concern is the safety of the workers, of the people who are in the building, anyone who's working around it, and definitely any damages to the property, whether it be the building itself or the contents within it. So it is my understanding that our insurance is sufficient, but I would share that information and work with you guys to cover anywhere where we felt vulnerable.
If I could just jump in on this one quickly, Councillor Butler, before you start. You see, again, repeating myself here, the element here is not the building, it's an asset. That is something that can easily be replaced. That is just a material thing. The concern here is the human beings and the lives, because the city has already experienced one incident, as you well recall. If not, I will relate it to you, the rafting incident that occurred over the falls.
I'm actually not aware.
Well, the city was also implicated in that case, which it was even not in our area, and yet still it cost the taxpayers. We had to defend ourselves accordingly on this situation. And this is an element where we do not want to embark on. This is not an avenue that the city wants to go down, because we are, let's say, the guardians of our taxpayers here. They are the ones that will be footing the bill should there be a major litigation cost. And as we can very well see, next of kin family will be the first to act should someone perish in that building. The building is irrelevant. That's a material thing. Councillor Butler.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, tough situation today. I echo what Councillor Tripp said earlier. As you know, when the MAPS project came to council at the beginning of our term, I was the only one that voted in favor of the MAPS project. I very much supported you guys throughout that. I spoke to council strongly in your favor throughout that project. I talked for many hours at length with your previous executive director about your patrons, about your work down there. I myself volunteered when you first moved to your new location. I shop there all the time. We've had a lot of concerns come to council from residents. I'm not going to lie. There's been a lot of people write in with extremely serious concerns. A lot of those are in camera, and I can't talk about them. But what really did it for me was the day that I came in shopping and you guys were both at the counter, and a known drug addict came out of the bathroom and told all of us that she had just done pills in the bathroom. She went to high 10 my friend, who had the presence of mind not to touch her hands, because if she'd been doing fentanyl, that can kill you. And nothing was done. I talked with you guys afterwards about it, and I heard you mention harm reduction. And it's my understanding that you're okay with drug use in your facility. From what I saw, there was nothing done when drug use was in front of all of us. There was nothing said to this person. And that's a real concern for me, especially when it comes to liability for the city, that if drug use and fentanyl use are being permitted on those premises, I cannot be in favor of keeping it open. I'm sorry.
Can you confirm, by the way, it's come to my attention that the Friday before New Year's, there were apparently 2 to 3 overdoses at Whispers. Can you confirm that or deny that?
I cannot confirm that. I don't know of that situation being the case. Whispers was actually closed until January 2nd. On the Tuesday to Friday prior to that week, we did offer the kitchen services, but that's only open from 9 until 1. We didn't have any incidences at that time. In December, I know we had a few close calls and some scares where the Narcan kits were requested. In one case, one was administered, in another case it wasn't. And again, those were actually outside of our operating hours, but because we were around and present, we were able to help address them and be there before first aid responders were able to attend. So I don't know about the specific instance you're talking about. I have heard about your concerns, Julia, in terms of a known drug addict. Unfortunately, I think the individual you're referring to actually has severe mental health issues due to trauma.
Yes.
And primarily that person's behavior is a little erratic, and it's not necessarily able to attribute to particular drug use or just depending on the lucidity for the day. But that individual says many outlandish and absurd things all the time. Now I'm able to confront these people on their behavior and correct it. But again, having said that, without witnessing it, and like you're saying, if an individual says, "Oh, I took my medication. I was just taking my medication. That's why I'm taking so long in the bathroom."
That's not the word to
it's
use.
pretty subjective. That's my recollection of the scenario, unfortunately.
Again, as a landlord, that is a massive risk to the corporation. Should something happen to that individual, again, family and next to kin, they always go after deep pockets, i.e. the city. Councillor Ross.
I just find it interesting we're having this conversation about drug use. There's a lot of filibustering going on, talking about wiring and vents and drug abuse, when we actually also own Gallery 2, which is an expensive building and is occupied, where they serve alcohol. They have wine tasting nights and liquor, lots of liquor. And we don't ever talk about what's your insurance, what happens if somebody drinks too much, and I've seen it at the wine tasting and falls down the stairs. We don't have that conversation because I guess most people can afford to pay $70 each for their wine tasting tickets. So if you're dressed up and wearing earrings and high heels and consuming vast masses amount of alcohol in a city-owned building, that's okay. So I'm just finding this a little bit hypocritical that we are talking about how much insurance do you have? What about people taking antipsychotics or something in your bathrooms? And we're going after you all of a sudden. We've been sitting here in council for almost 4 years, over 3 years, and now we're really concerned about your insurance and what's going on in your buildings. We've never had this conversation about Gallery 2, where we own that building and they consume a lot of people go there and they consume large amounts of alcohol, but they're all dressed up, so I guess it's okay. I find this highly hypocritical.
I find it a very sarcastic comparison, Councillor
It's
Ross.
not, it's
Councillor Thompson,
legitimate.
go ahead.
Thank you.
There's nothing I can say today that you're
Had
Councillor Ross.
we been aware, or had I as a councillor been aware of the issues, particularly with the wiring, and I'm glad you remedied the ventilation, I would not have supported police. I would have wanted to see the building vacated immediately. I don't care how much insurance you have. The thing is that it's not going to be worth the paper it's written on if the insurance company becomes aware or is made aware of the condition of the wiring. And I am not prepared, quite frankly, to put the taxpayers of this community at risk. I fully support helping people. My husband and I have fully supported the Whispers of Hope with many, many donations. We did a purge this spring, and much of it was good stuff went to the Whispers. But I cannot ask and put our community at risk I'll be perfectly blunt, I will not be able to support the resolution to extend your lease. I think that there are other places and other ways of achieving the objectives that the Whispers wants to do. I think it's an excellent organization. I have nothing against the people who work there, or the people who use their services. But having said that, it cannot and should not be occurring in a building with facilities that are not safe. And, you know, I see that the Whispers of, pardon me, Beth's is here. But they haven't been asking for any extensions of lease. It's strictly the Whispers of Hope. And it's the Whispers of Hope portion that really, really concerns me. And I hear you that you've made efforts, but I think that there are other ways and means. I see Tammy Battersby sitting in the gallery. And I think that the Gospel Chapel has a fully serviced commercial kitchen. And until such times as you can find a location to do your meals, I think that there are ways around that. Perhaps you could rent that facility from the Gospel Chapel for the short term until you find another place. If you're concerned about people accessing and being able to come to get the meals, I think there's enough volunteers that would be able to come down and pick those people up and take them and serve them a hot meal. Conversely, there's perhaps the potential of serving a hot meal and putting them in serving dishes or whatever that can be taken down to them. There's creative ways that this issue can be dealt with, and probably wouldn't have a great deal of difficulty locating for your thrift store. You may have difficulty in locating with the commercial kitchen, but that would give you time to look around and to come to a conclusion, and hopefully a good conclusion. But at this point in time, I personally cannot support having a facility that's, quite frankly, my husband is an industrial electrician, and I showed him the pictures, and he said, "Oh, that's not legal." And so I can't support that.
Just a quick interjection here on that subject matter. Are you aware that BC Housing has a backup plan in place for funding in regards to putting people up in motels, et cetera, and other contingency plans? Were you aware of that?
I'm actually not fully aware of all the options that are available to do with housing, because our company actually doesn't deal with housing. We deal particularly with food, providing essentials, and providing a gathering space where people can get support and learn. I suppose I'm just curious at what role the city plays in this. We keep talking about liabilities. Again, we share these same concerns, but we talked about how, you know, it's taken us months to clean the vent. And I'm curious why the manager of building inspection only brought up his concerns with our electrical now and not even to us. If he did his walkabout in October and identified this as being such a hazardous situation, I would have hoped that he would have made that information available immediately so that we can correct it. So while we ourselves are working and doing our best to bring everything up to code and be compliant and ensure we are safe, I believe there is a level of responsibility that we might not be seeing on your part as well as the city. So again, I don't want to lay any blame. I would rather just instead us work together to ensure that we are covering these things, because we share the same concerns. We do not want any person to be harmed. And furthermore, I'd say it seems that council is more concerned about the liability as opposed to the actual health and livelihood of the individuals who are at risk. And yes, that may be in our building to do with operations, and we have a responsibility not to neglect it, but as well, what responsibility does the city have to these individuals who may now receive no services, who may not have food, whose building may burn down and they no longer have clothing and blankets and the essential items to move on and live their lives. So you're right. We do have commercial kitchens that we may be able to rent. There are so many of our supporters that we can pull upon to bring forward whatever options we can. We are resilient, and we will limp through this, however long it takes for us to lick our wounds. We're an organization that's grown out of need by the locals for the locals. So I really don't see that going away until that need is actually satiated through some other means. I'm just worried that, in an effort to lose weight fast, the city is about to cut off its leg. We have become a very important safety network for our community, and to put us in a position where we might have to stop services is really going to exacerbate the suffering of those who are impoverished at the moment. So I'd say please consider the harm that may be done by those who won't be able to access our services.
To comment on that, I fully understand the social aspect of what you're conveying forward, because never once have I said I don't have a social conscience, but the bottom line is here, when you had mentioned that the building burns to the ground because of the legalities and the possible litigation and the liabilities. My only hope would be if that building does burn to the ground, it doesn't burn to the ground with someone in it. And that is, again, they reiterate so emphatically, is the main concern. And when we see basic violations and non-compliance issue, you said if you would have known, well, you knew about the venting, and you yourself stated, and I did the documentation timelines for you, it took 2 months. Something as serious as that cannot take 2 months. Myself, I'm in the industry. You do not leave something like that for 2 months. You jump all over it no matter what it costs. And even if you have to go to your landlord and say, we're short on funding, but we have to get this fixed because there is a potential risk here. Once the corporation knows that that risk is there, which was confirmed by our fire chief, we also risk the fact that our MIA will not cover us. So there, in a nutshell, is the whole concept of this meeting and what I'm putting forward. It is not about the social aspect alone, because I've never once said that I do not have a social heart for this. But we do not want to turn this into a social, because it'll become horrific if somebody perishes in that establishment which we own, or the taxpayers own. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad, and I know we should probably be hearing from Steve McGibbon too, but I guess why can't we give them a bit of time? I think Councillor Thompson had some good ideas about potentially trying to collaborate with some of the churches or other places in town. I know you guys have been looking, because I've been hearing from some of your directors about actually specific buildings that he has named, that you've gone into. He's shared with me the reasons why those facilities have not been acceptable. Either there's been too many renovations required, or they're too small, or, I mean, there's lots of reasons why. So I know you've been looking at it. That has been ongoing for many, many months. I'm thinking, now that we all know what the deficiencies are, why can't we give you, we'll get those things done, like lickety-split, and then give you a little bit of time to get your ducks in a row, find another place, and then, you'll be set to go.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm not prepared, quite frankly, to put the taxpayers' dollars into that building. When I talked to you, Louise, at the forum in December, I was basing the $50,000 for renovations on redoing the roof. Having read the reports prepared by our building inspector, it's well over $300,000 to bring that building up to code. And I'm not going to ask or put the taxpayers at having to pay for that. And so I think that I have proposed some alternatives. I even hesitate, quite frankly, allowing that facility to remain open until February the 10th, or the 15th, or 8th, because of the fact that we know, council now knows the condition of that building. And I think, council, having known that, and if there were an incident and there were lawsuits, and we supported the continuation of that lease, we are personally responsible. The taxpayers could sue us. I'm not in a financial position to be able to afford that, I'm sorry. So I think that you and your organization and the wonderful work that you do and the services that you provide, you're going to have to relocate.
It's, by the way, Councillor Thompson, it's not just council that's aware of it now. Now it is public knowledge.
That's great, yeah.
So even the insurance companies, MIA, know about it. It's out in the open now. The gentleman in the second, well, we'll call it the second row. Go ahead, sir.
I just kind of wanted to address your thing with BC.
Could you identify yourself, please, first for the record?
My name is Steve McGibbon, and I'm with BETS. I am the coordinator there. Your comment on BC housing, funding, motel rooms, and other alternatives. BETS has nothing in writing from BC Housing. I was asked at one point to seek an alternative, but without a letter of funding, I can't approach a motel or anyone else and say BC Housing will fund this and insure it without that in writing. And if there's one thing I've learned about BC Housing, you want it right. And yes, of course, BETS would like an extension. We have nowhere to put our people, and it's the coldest month of the year. So the next thing is these inadequacies of wiring and all that. Let's pull it out of there. We have to do something now, no matter what, right? So if there's bare wires just doing extra plugs, let's pull the plugs. Let's look for a solution and not a.
The unfortunate part to that is now it's public awareness, and because the city owns the building, it'll be at the city's cost to rewire it up to code should that occur.
I don't know what to tell you there.
Well, I just told you what there is to tell me.
Okay, so
there's the answer. The cost again to the city because something was done without permission, without proper professional installation. And I have our CEO commenting on the BC Housing.
Your worship, we, of course, the city doesn't have any control as to what correspondence or anything happens as far as BC Housing's commitment to the emergency shelter portion. But we did have a conversation as staff prior to Christmas, and they had advised us at that time that they were looking at alternative solutions and perhaps putting the folks that use the extreme shelter into possible motels or some other situation of what they have. But they did have some kind of planning in place that they were going to look at honoring until the end of the extreme weather shelter, which I think is March 31st.
Okay, you're mentioning a conversation, ma'am. We had the same conversation, and they did say that they would indicated that they would put up some funding, but nothing in writing. Nothing I can move forward with.
Well, I guess we got to start getting the pens rolling.
Good luck getting something off of them.
Well, not us, ourselves. That's out of our control. That's in your department.
Yes.
Gentleman in the third row. That would be yourself.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Andre Borak. I was the coordinator at Whispers of Hope for almost 4 years. And I find it kind of interesting, actually, this morning that I had to be in town for other business while this meeting was going on, and I was told that perhaps I could bring some information to the table. I think personally, I've been listening to the conversation that we've been having, some of it here, some of it on social media over the last year that I've been away, and I think there's a lot of very passionate people about this particular topic of homelessness, addictions, and mental health. And before I left, I was hoping we were going to be able to come to some sort of resolve to actually find a solution. And some of you will remember me trying to talk about the medicine hat model, and Donna Sutton's here today, and I was trying to, because I knew I was leaving. And I was hoping that we could come to the solution of really coming to some sort of long-term plan. But what we really have on the table today is that we're not going to be able to solve a long-term or develop a long-term solution here right now in this room, as much as all of us would like to. I know, Mayor Conrad, that you talked about the social aspects of it, and that most of us in this room are here because we care about our community and we care about the individuals that are out there that are homeless. So I don't think that's the issue. I do find it kind of interesting that all of a sudden we're talking about, fire extinguishers that haven't been checked and wiring and this, and all of a sudden we're having this conversation, 3-4 years into this program, and all of a sudden it's the big, huge issue. Personally, I believe that it's not actually the big, huge issue, as much as we were trying to put it. I think personally the issue is the social side. And a lot of us are frustrated with the vandalism and the thefts and the troubles that we see, the people out on the street, and we know that they're not doing well, that we need to help them some way. But the question is, we all don't know how, and we want to. Council wants to, Whispers of Hope wants to, Beth wants to, they want to help them. But what's on the table today isn't the big, grandiose, how are we going to save all these people? What's on the table today is, should we shut down Whispers of Hope and the shelter on February 8th? I believe that's, or today even. And all I was going to say is, I'm going to tell you a story. Last year, just after the shelter shut down, I went to work like I always do, and there was a young lady that was, the shelter just shut down. It was a few days after. She was sitting in the chair next to the door to the shelter, wrapped up in a blanket. And she had a little heater underneath her some little car heater that was plugged into my electricity, Whispers. And I thought oh man, I can't believe she's using electricity. And I said, oh, it's cold. And I knew she was cold. I walked in, she followed me, and she must have heard that I was pulling in. She said, can I use the bathroom? She went to the bathroom, she turned the hot water on really quick and put her hands underneath it. A few moments later, she was screaming in pain and agony. Her hands had really severe frostbite. She was trying to warm them up under the sink, and it just caused extreme pain in her hands. I grabbed her hands and I tried to warm them up, and I'm like, do you want to go to the hospital? I can bring her to the hospital. She's like, no, just give it some time, give it some time. I'm like, okay, I'll give it some time. I'm trying to warm her hands. I noticed her hands are like really rough. I'm living on the street, right? And I was thinking about the whole situation as I was trying to warm up her hands. It's like the door's locked. A week ago, she was staying in the shelter and she was fine. It's not unlike the situation that we have right now. We're thinking of locking the door. And what we forget is that these are human beings, and that we wouldn't treat animals that way. It is a social issue, and I understand that we're fed up with some of the crap that's been going on in our community. All of us are. But to shut the shelter right now and to shut the soup kitchen right now is not going to help the situation. What you need to do is, yes, we want to make a long-term plan. We want to get together with the transition house in the city and all these, the fire department here, Fenske's here. We were all talking about a long-term plan, but we can't get there today. What we have to decide today is, do these people that need these services have the right to have a decent place to stay and sleep and have food in their bellies? Do they have that right? And I think that all of us that care, which we all do care, would say, yes, they have the right. And by shutting this down, we're not serving them. We're not doing anything for them. And I want to just add one little thing, and this is the part that hurts the most to me. I get passionate about it. That young lady is not with us today. She died this summer. And you know where she died? She died while she was still living on the riverbank. And I remember the day that I heard that she died, and I said, you know what? We can do better. We can do better than letting people of our community. She's a long-term Grand Fork person. We're not talking some transient that came into town. She has family here. She's had family here. She's got kids. She's even had a grandchild, past year. I don't think you even got to see. So I look at you, Mayor Conrad, actually, because you're at the head of this. Is your town. You're the head of this town. We've elected you in this position. We're asking you, lead the ship, guide the ship. You have the influence. You have the ability to be able to say to your councilors and the people in this room, are we going to let our citizens that have been in this town for a long time die on the riverbank? Or are we going to let them stay in the shelter until we find a better alternative? Get some food at Whispers until we find a better alternative. Shutting those things down is not going to help us. It's only going to make things worse.
The quick response to that, sir, is the fact absolutely not. They will not be staying in that shelter that is unsafe for human habitation. You had stated that all of a sudden We did not embark on this to single you out or to single out Whispers to find reasons to get, let me finish please, reasons to have you out of there. This is something because, like you said, of what's been going on in this community with the crime, with the drugs, red flags have come up. Because it's been for 3 years, 4 years under this condition with, let's say, the wiring, etc., that doesn't make it right. You were just fortunate that nothing has happened. But now, once it's come to the surface, it has to be dealt with. Again, may I say, this is an operational issue that we are dealing with here today. I understand the heavy burden of the social aspect, fully understand. I have nothing in the smallest iota against homeless. I feel for these people, but not when you are yourself, this organization is subjecting them to a possible harm.
So I was the one that was organizing any of the improvements that were being done in that building. And I was the one that was around when the fire chief and the building inspector decided they wanted to come through for the first time 3 years into the lease when some of these social issues started coming up. So I can attest to some of the things that you're talking about. I can comment on that. First of all of the work that was done when we first opened that place, probably $150,000 was basically paid for by Habitat for Humanity, who I happen to work for currently. Habitat for Humanity, as you all know, is no slouch when it comes to building. They're not just some fly-by-night contractor. They've built 17 different units in this community, and they've done a great job at it, and I'm proud of the 3 that are going up right now, and they're doing it first rate. All the electrical that has been done was done with permit by local people, and I can get those receipts and those things done by certified electricians.
Up until occupancy, correct?
Even after occupancy. Andy Chaffo is one of my friends. He's a licensed electrician. He has done almost all the electrical work that was done after occupancy. He's a licensed local electrician in this community. As far as the hood range, and the hood range was inspected on a regular basis by Jason McIver, who is qualified to do so. It was cleaned on a regular basis. Yes, we were a little bit late this time around, okay? It was cleaned on a regular basis. The fire extinguishers, same thing. He's a qualified safety inspector of the fire extinguishers and whatnot, and he's been doing those checks on an ongoing basis. So all of a sudden, if we have an issue, and even if we do, I love what Steve is saying, even if we do, let's just fix it. You need to change this fire extinguisher? Whispers of Hope will pay to do that. We need to put some wiring in. We don't have to put the burden on the taxpayer. We at Whispers have a business that we can spend some money and get it up to code. We're talking about conduit on a wire. I mean, these are not of a plug-in that was added in after. Okay, change the wire. Pull the plug out. That's what Steve is saying. Pull the plug out. Let's get it up to code. It's this heavy-handed shut the place down is because of the social issues. So you keep trying to separate the two. But the truth is this is not about dotting our I's and crossing our T's when it comes to, we keep saying liability. We carry liability insurance. We've carried it for years. We've always carried it. We have to. Of course we do. Sure, it's a public thing that there's some deficiencies that need to be fixed. Let's fix them. Why not? This community is going to need, every community in the province is having the same problem. This community is going to need a soup kitchen. It's going to need a shelter, just like every other community does. You're going to all of a sudden say, no, we're not going to need it. We don't need it. We're going to shut it down, or we're going to transfer it around to someplace else. The location is a good location. I know that there's some passion behind the fact that it's next to the river and that it's a nice spot for maybe a park or something like that. But until we can come with a long-term plan, the long-term solution of actually getting these people, out of the shelter and out of the soup kitchen, shutting it down is just a heavy-handed act.
Again, quickly, these last issues that you commented on in regards to the wiring, the hood.
Yes.
This is not why Whispers is closing. The initial lease termination was established in August. These are just latest add-ons. Remember this, please. Remember the history.
August of this year.
In August, exactly. So it has nothing really.
So why are we shutting it out in February?
That was already established with the 6-month agreement that came forward by council. Was a resolution of council.
We're not even fulfilling the lease. lease that was signed 5 years ago isn't being fulfilled. It's being
I'm just trying to
terminated by
point out to
city.
the fact to you, sir, that it has nothing to do only with these latest issues. These are just add-on contraventions.
And
But
they're
the initial-
insurmountable in your mind.
Pardon me?
They're insurmountable in your mind, that we cannot fix those issues.
They're not insurmountable at this point, but God forbid should something happen, then they would be very insurmountable if during the interim. Councilor Thompson, then, okay.
Just quickly, whatever decision is made is not going to be popular. There are factions on, let's work with these people, keep it open. There are factions that are saying, shut it down, it never should have been allowed to be there. And had I known in August what I know now as a result of the reports from our fire chief and our building inspector, I would have been extremely hesitant on even giving Whispers and Beth's 6 months. So regrettably, and there's going to be those that say I'm heartless. I'm not, but it cannot and should not be allowed to remain open and putting our taxpayers, many of who sit in this room, at risk. And, social aspect, yes, that's very important, but that's not the issue. The issue is, for me, is the condition of that building.
I'm going to let Louise speak first, and then I'll speak.
I just wanted to say, as the chair for Whispers of Hope, I find it very distressing that the first I heard of contraventions to the electrical system was on Facebook on the weekend. If that was a real issue that Whispers of Hope or Beth's needed to address, why were we not informed that, hey, this is a real problem here? Why did I read that on Facebook on the weekend? Mm-hmm. Just asking.
That's a good valid question.
Yeah.
That is a valid question. Yeah. There should have been.
I agree, that's a valid question.
Lorraine Dick, I am so disappointed in my council members. Most of you have made up your mind as to how you are voting before you have even listened to this report. I'm shocked and I'm saddened. And Mr. Conrad, I would really like to, Mayor, sorry, what is the appropriate? Yeah. Mayor Conrad, your position is as chairman. You are not the head. You should be asking questions and listening for the answers of these people and not continually forcing your opinion. Now, the other thing I'd like to say is there needs to be a timeline. When I rent an apartment or a house in Grand Forks, I walk through the house with my landlord and we do an inspection check. And when I move out, we go through that apartment or that house and we cross-reference and we see what damage I've done. Based on what I've heard, this was not done when the lease was done. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to be a great timeline. What was the condition of this building when Whispers took on the lease? And then why wasn't they informed along the way? And then again, the inspection afterwards. These things need to be documented in a timeline.
Thank you for your comments on explaining to me how I should do my position as chair and as mayor, first and foremost. Secondly, when the lease was established, it was from previous council. You are now talking to present council. If that was not performed by previous council, I cannot comment on what previous council did. Furthermore, this is operational, and I will say this once again. Before being mayor and the CEO of this corporation, I am a taxpayer like everyone else in this room. And I have to safeguard that element where if something goes wrong, wrong in this community. I am the CEO and the mayor of all of my constituents, not just a certain faction. And nobody has pre-decided anything prior to the meeting. We listened to the delegation. So I find it very appalling that you would make a statement like that, but that's your privilege. Thank you. Gentleman in the back, and then the lady in the second row.
Okay, I won't go into the social activist thing. I'm definitely on their side, not on your side on this, but as a taxpayer, who would be on the hook if something went wrong? First off, in your first conversation with Councillor Ross, she was trying to point out that the city has responsibility, and you said, no, they don't. Well, liability determines who's responsible. Really, where does the buck stop? It stops with the taxpayers if something goes wrong. Therefore, ipso facto, you're responsible. So if appealing to your heartstrings is not good enough, well, how about this? If you pull the rug out from underneath the support system for the homeless here in this town, what you're going to do is you're going to make it tougher on them. Now, problems that happen as a result of that end up with things that could be actionable in court by an insurance company, for instance. Anybody who's done a dance with the insurance company knows that they will look for any way to stop paying as much as they can and foist that off onto somebody else. So if the city has created conditions which make it unsafe for citizens and visitors in the city, and something happens, who's going to be on the hook for that? For instance, last year when the whole place turned into a tinderbox and we were really worried that things were going to burn down, and one or more of the homeless people were setting fires to keep warm in the middle of the night in the bush, and everybody was really scared. Well, okay, let's say you shut down Whispers and Beth's and they don't have a place to go. How many more homeless are going to be starting fires just to keep warm in the middle of the night? And if that turns into a conflagration and burns half the town down, the insurance companies for those houses and businesses will be looking for who to pin that debt onto. And it'll definitely be on us, the taxpayer, because they will be able to point out from all of your deliberations that you put a stop to the things that were keeping these people from doing that to some degree. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed thing, but I'm saying from my point of view as a taxpayer, I see a liability issue. Now, as far as things like you are the landlord, we are the landlord, and things have happened that we don't like, okay, if I rent my place out to a business that is capable of taking care of things and paying for maintenance and upkeep and doing everything fine, I expect that they'll do that. But if I rent it out to a struggling organization that's run by volunteers, that has problems making ends meet, and I turn my back on them for 4 or 5 years, should I be expected to believe that they wouldn't have done things in the meantime that I might not like? I mean, really, from the point of view of an insurance company, they would turn around and they say to you, well, how come you didn't come and help them? How come you didn't come every 6 months to find out whether they needed anything done or how they were doing so you could help them do their job better? No, you did what voters here do with city council every 3 or 4 years. They vote you in, and then essentially they turn their back on you, hoping that you'll do a good job until they find out you're not doing a good job. Then they get all upset and they want to kick you out. Gee, in fact, before the last election, when the fight for the water meters was starting up, I was at a meeting over in the senior center, and I remember seeing somebody I hadn't noticed before very loudly saying, well, then just kick the bums out. And guess who that was? You're sitting in that seat right there. You said kick the bums out. Council, previous council. And now you're saying kick them out. From my point of view, really, I would rather that you supported them as they tried to support people who are, we can't fix the homeless problem. That's everywhere. I understand that. But making it worse for them makes it worse for all of us. I mean, you have Sharp's disposal units around town. Why? Well, there's two things. You don't want people to step on needles. They're kids to pick up needles and get hurt, that's true. But also from a liability point of view, if you have sharps disposal units and somebody steps on a needle and sues the city, you have ammunition to say, well, we're doing the best we can. You're not doing the best you can if you kick these people, these organizations that support these people out of where they are. That's my take.
I just have one rebuttal on all the statements you made.
Yep.
I would never, you better roll your cameras back again, because I would never have made a statement, kick the bums out. Even as a citizen, I do not talk like that. My statement was I would put a moratorium on the water meter program or stop it. Never kick the bums out. That's not in my.
Actually, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we might want to look at that one.
That meeting was actually recorded. And I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I can look it up.
Yeah, look it up. Make sure it was, make sure it was myself that made that statement and not somebody else from the gallery.
You were
who
standing
assumed-
5 feet in front of me. I saw
Well,
you, so
okay.
anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Councilor Ross.
I think Tammy.
Oh, sorry. Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy Battersby. I'm a community care coordinator at Gospel Chapel and also vice chair on the Whispers board. And I am a taxpayer and a homeowner here in Grand Forks. So I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. One, just to lay the groundwork. In the beginning of August, we were given a cease and desist, which was interesting because I didn't know that a city could tell nonprofits to cease and desist, and a 30-day eviction. Which then, as a council, you decided to rescind, and you gave us a list of reasons and a promise that if we were in compliance with those reasons within 30 days, that we would be able to stay. So I'm assuming that our being able to stay the last 5 months is proof that we were in compliance at that 30-day mark. And so, we've come here today to say, hi, we're here, we're in compliance, and we'd like an extension so that we can continue to operate in compliance until the end of our lease. And it's not meant to be controversial. It's meant to be friendly. It's meant to bring about collaboration and working together so that we can continue voluntarily providing a service that benefits a city. And there are many ways our city is benefited by these services. Would a different location be better? I don't know. We've been looking into that. Some of the places we've looked at mean moving anywhere from 1 to 5 businesses out. As a former business owner, I'm not interested in evicting businesses so that we can, have that much of a hit on our economic flow in order for us to survive when we're already in a building. I think that that's counterproductive. And then the other piece that comes to my mind is, give me 1 second. Thinking back to April from the community care coordinator side of things, and another hat I've worn is I am trained to be part of the provincial emergency program, emergency evacuation site in the case of fires, floods, etc. And it's funny to me that I did not think at the time when the floods came up that we should have enacted a provincial emergency plan. We should have had an evacuation center for all parties that were affected by our floods. I didn't think of it, so I imagine many of you didn't think of it. As my understanding is, there was 6 or so homeowners that declined evacuation, but there was 13 people within the town that were displaced because of the floods who were hidden away and we didn't know about them. So them and their tents and their gear were hidden away and they were displaced when the floods came up. The number totals, if you include the rural, 30 people. At the time, Gospel Chapel did a fundraiser to help people get their kits back, to set up. And still, like I say, I apologize. I didn't think to say, hey, somebody should set up an evacuation center. So ultimately what happened is all these people came up into town and our city became aware that we have homeless. And then they also got to be front stage to some of the behaviors and difficulties and challenges of homelessness. And it's been messy, right? It's been messy. But it was wonderful to see those flood pictures and go, yeah, right. That's kind of what began this. Was, wow, these people are there, they're on city trails. And we asked them to move. We asked them to move and documented it on several occasions. but we don't have authority over city trails or public lands or floodplains that belong to the government. We only have authority over the area that we leasehold, you know, and we've worked hard to oversee that authority. I understand Julia's concerns. However, you know, there's needle tins in the library, in the bathrooms. So if you know, holding us accountable for somebody maybe or maybe not using in a bathroom because we don't know for proof, then don't we have to hold all the bathrooms in town accountable? Like, it just seems, there's a standard here that's kind of funny. You know, we do have many places in town that support people. As to the church, you know, I'm happy, Councillor Thompson, that you recognize that Gospel Chapel would want to, and we'd be happy to help where we can in this situation. It is good that you know that about the church. How much we can help, I'm not sure. I certainly will take that to the membership. I'm one of many, so it's not something that I could just up and make a decision on. And it is interesting to me that you would make that decision for us, though.
I don't make a decision.
I do want to thank you for taking the time to hear the delegation.
Councillor Ross and then Councillor Thompson. But Councillor Ross, can I just have Councillor Thompson give the rebuttal to that before we lose the train of thought?
I'm not going to do that.
Oh, on this, okay.
Yeah, I really appreciated with Andre. I'm both surprised and delighted at what Andre had to share. It's not what I expected to hear from him, and it's pretty much exactly what I was going to speak to when my motion is being presented. I sent my motion to council on December 28th. And I believe that there's been a scrambling happening by sending over the fire chief and the building inspector quickly, and so that they could find other reasons to shut you down. Because what I heard from Andre Borak was all that installation was done to code. It was done by Habitat for Humanity. It was done by a licensed electrician, but evidently that's not good enough. The fact that you had a hard time finding a tradesperson in this town is not surprising. I had a leaking roof for 8 months, severe drywall damage. It took me so long to get somebody into this town to fix my roof, and they had to come back several times to do it right. And then it took 4 months to get my drywall, 6 months almost to get my drywall fixed. So, you know, it's not easy in this town to get somebody to come and do these highly skilled jobs. And then on January 4th, and I didn't see it right away, there was a report from our building inspector and the fire chief to say, what else is wrong? Like, you've complied, oh, but whoops, now there's this and this and this. So I think it's like, no matter what you do and how you defend yourself, you're sort of hooped. And I agree completely with Andrea. What he has said is that, you know, this is a social issue. And it is our responsibility as leaders in this community, not just to take care of bricks and mortars and sewers and water lines, but to ensure that the most fragile in our society are cared for and we're covered. And we will be judged as a society and as a town and how we treat the most marginalized and fragile in our community. So that's all I have to say about that. But think about the date. On December 28th, they got that motion, and they've been working really hard to find reasons, practical reasons, to defeat that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, for throwing staff under the bus. Councillor Thompson and then our CAO.
It wasn't staff.
It did not come from you, Councillor Ross, because I didn't even do anything.
You've been arguing me via email for weeks.
Councillor Ross, you're out of order. Councillor Thompson, then our CAO, and then Councillor Crock.
Just a couple of things. Tammy, I was suggesting that the Whispers could rent. That was my intention. If I didn't say that, that's what I should have said.
Thank you for that.
Kitchen in the Gospel Chapel on a temporary basis until they found a new location. And I think that it was a very, very valid question asked, and I don't see our building inspector here, but the fire chief, and perhaps he could address when the inspections were done, and I think you and the building inspector did them together. Were your concerns communicated either verbally or in writing, or both, to the Whispers, either executive director or the board?
Yes, in mid-October, my concerns were put forth in writing to the manager. The building inspector accompanied me on the inspection. A little bit of a miscommunication. He thought that I was going to put the electrical in my inspection. I thought he was going to provide an inspection report. So I did not put that portion of the electrical in my inspection. And I assumed that he had provided a report. I mean, we don't work side by side. Right? Can I just say one more thing? As far as any improvements post the initial inspection when it opened, if it was a certified electrician, they were not code. It is totally against code what was put up in there. And if that was a certified electrician, you might want to look at his license.
Thank you. Okay. I guess what the other thing I'm asking is that when the building inspector was there, and I'm assuming you did it together, were his concerns communicated verbally down to the manager?
I can't answer to him.
Can we ask our management to check into that, please?
Can I just make one statement here? Again, our fire chief was kind of put on the spot there, but to make assumptions that it's not to code, we don't have that ability, because even our building inspector would not be dealing with electrical. That is a provincial issue where you have a provincial inspector looking at that. So not questioning the fire chief nor our building inspector, but that's not in our domain as a local building inspector to look at the electrical. Gas and electrical goes under the province. So there would have to be some kind of certification issued by the province, a provincial inspector, which I believe now comes out of Kelowna. It used to come out of Trail. Being in the industry, I used Nelson Trail, but mostly Trail. And now it's out of Kelowna. So at the time, it might have been probably Nelson or Trail. But in any event, just the fact that there is a element of concern by looking at the wiring is sufficiently enough to initiate an investigation on it.
And again, through you to our CAO, do you know whether or not the electrical inspector has been made aware and requested to perform an inspection on that facility?
Your worship, I don't believe he has at this point in time. I think that by doing that, it would likely end up being the onus of the city that would have to make sure there is, being that building inspection, doesn't have that under their purveyance. But they could actually have kind of an idea of what the cost would be, and it likely would have been or would be between $40,000 and $50,000 to change whatever was done in there. And so it doesn't go, even though the city did not approve of what happened in there when they provided the occupancy permit on the lease agreement, and it was done after, it would still encompass then onto the city. They would say, okay, you need to fix this. And I guess at the point that the council would have to appreciate that when our fire department and our electrical, or our building inspector, went to inspect, it was not that you're going to go out and look for trouble. It was actually somebody that had come in with a complaint that had some dire concerns with the condition of the stove. And so that, again, is a response to a complaint. And so when council looked at the lease, of course, we were looking at all the pieces of the lease. It's not to do with anything else at that point. And that's when we kind of gave the advice and said, here's the conditions of the lease. Whispers and Beth both met the conditions. And however, clarification, I think when Ms. Battersby spoke, is that there was two pieces to the letter, which was the compliance to the lease, and also it was the city hereby further gives you notice that the lease is terminated pursuant to section 30 of the lease after the expiry of 60 months of your receipt of this letter. To be clear, the termination of the lease under section 30 of the lease is effective even if you have fully resolved the aforementioned contraventions of your obligations under the lease within the 230 days and under section 23 and 20 of the lease. So again, the city is dealing with the aspects of the lease as far as the letter that was delivered to the organizations on the 8th of August.
If I may just weigh in on that quickly, what our CEO just stated, and based on that, if the Electrical Safety Board was made aware of the situation, then us, the city and the corporation and the taxpayers being the landlord, so to speak, we would have to bring that building totally up to code. That part I am totally knowledgeable on. It would have to be totally brought up to code, not just that wiring, anything. Once something was touched, it has to be brought up to present day code, which would represent an exuberant cost for the corporation.
If the corporation chose to
Notify.
do that. But I see our building inspectors here, and so if I could just backtrack a little bit and ask, when you did the inspection with the fire chief and you saw some things that concerned you, did you communicate that verbally and or in writing to the Whispers of Hope manager?
Through the mayor, no, not at that time. I communicated that to our fire chief.
Councilor Claude, would you like to speak to something on this issue? Yeah, just a couple of things. Some of it's kind of been addressed. Mr. Borick's comments about the electrical and when it was done, and it has to be done under permit. So from what he said, it sounded like, oh, okay, a permit was taken out. If a permit's taken out, then it's inspected by an electrical inspector to make sure they adhere to the permit. And just from the pictures I've seen and my limited knowledge about electrical systems, you can tell it was done after the fact, it was done without a permit, and it wasn't done correctly, right? So I'm not sure who did it. If the licensed electrician came back later after the install and decided to jury rig some sketchy plugins, that does not sound like any electrician that would actually be able to hold a license anywhere. So that was one of the things. The other is I'll go back to liability, and people say that you can't put money against suffering, that type of thing, if you want to put them on balance. And I think what the mayor had mentioned earlier kind of got lost. Example is, years ago, some rafters went over the falls, way out there, okay? The city of Grand Forks was named in the lawsuit because we had pictures in our advertising brochures that showed happy people tubing within the city. So trust me, if there's any kind of lawsuit, they will go through, and I can guarantee that the volunteers and the society or the benevolence, whatever, do not have the money to be able to defend themselves, much less defend the city. And if we did get hit with 5 million liability, there's, I don't know, I think there's 22,000 and something portfolios. I don't have $2,000 to pay from my property towards something that happened that I had no control over. So every taxpayer in this town could be seeing a giant bill if things went wrong. So my concern is, like I said, if there's any kind of an extension, that the taxpayers are protected, the people using the service are protected, the people providing the service are protected. And as of right now, I'm not seeing it. If the wiring was all up to code, if there was extra insurance, all that type of stuff, that would meet the, not capital, but the opposite of the social, which I can't think of right now. Yeah, operational. And just as a human, as a member of our community, I drove by there on Friday to take my cat to the vet, And I saw a bunch of skis out front and some people were happily shopping, looking at the skis. And right at the corner where the door is, the best, there was 3 gentlemen doing a drug deal, right? Unless people just exchanged dollars for small packets for a collection. Like right there within, like just around the corner from people that were actually shopping there.
Did you report that, sir?
No, I did not. I had more concerns over my cat, sorry.
Right, yeah.
I can check that for you. We have cameras that recorded that spot.
Okay.
So.
Just to
Then
weigh
you
in,
know who I'm talking about.
just to weigh in, if I may, on the previous issue, which you had stated, Councillor Crog, that it was operational. Indeed it is, and I think we're getting real off the deep end here.
Yeah.
But as far as the electrical goes, I think we have to really be very cautious with our language to say that it's illegal, that it's not done to code, because we do not have the ability to make those kind of statements. But going back a bit on a couple of your statements, if indeed, I think the only element where the responsibility was on the organization of Whispers or Beth's, that if there was a certified electrician did the job, if there was a permit applied for, and if there was an inspection report done that it all passed, that should have been submitted to the landlord, which is the corporation. If nothing else, that should have been done. Whether it's illegal, that's not in our purveyance to say that, or to even speculate. That's not in our wheelhouse. That's not our job to say it's done illegal or it's legal or it wasn't a certified electrician. That's the only comment I have to have. But the documentation should have been submitted to the city, which is the landlord in question. And that was, I believe, not done unless we have that documentation. So we're kind of getting off the deep end. We're going down an avenue, perceiving that it's not legal, that's not done properly. I think that's out of our wheelhouse. But if we pursue this now, then of course, everything will have to be put up in code and it will cost the corporation money again. To the lady in the 3rd row, I believe.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Claudette. You'll have to forgive me, I'm a bit nervous. I have heard a lot of negative statements from everyone. You're gonna need best whether you like it or not. That's a need and that's a service that this town requires. Out of that negative statements that I've been hearing, I'm a success story. For me to stand up here and look at you in the eyes and say that this town needs it. I was in a car accident. I got flown to Kelowna. I came here hitchhiking on my crutches. Oh, I was starving. I had no place to go. Best was there. That kitchen was there. That food saved my life. Now, do I look like a drug addict to you? Do I look like an alcoholic? No, I'm a mother with 6 freaking kids. And yes, I am angry that you guys want to shut Best and Whispers down and you want to move them. An eviction notice means get out of here. And I don't want to see that place leave. That place is needed. I'm very nervous right now because you guys are all professionals. I come from the street and I'm here to say, you know what? You guys got a home. I didn't have a home. If it wasn't for that place that give me a meal every day, it helped me get a place. My rent is $11.25. All in all, I pay $1,300 for a place. It's a 4-bedroom house. I would love to have a roommate, somebody that I can give back to the community. That's what you guys are supposed to be doing, right? Giving back to the community. And you, Mr. Mayor, I've heard so many hypocritical things come out of your mouth that this guy should rewind that tape or that DVD and play it back to you. And let's see, you sound hypocritical. That's all I gotta say. I can't say anymore. Beth's is needed. The shelter is needed. That woman that Andre was talking about, that was my friend. And I'm a little emotional now because you guys all have houses. Why don't you go spend a week out there without your credit card, your bank card, your money, your place? Let's see how you survive. Sharps containers, they're needed because people are addicted. That homeless problem, start there. Start somewhere instead of saying, you know what, get the hell out. I'm sorry, but I've said my piece. I'm here as a friend and a person of this community. Grand Forks is my home now. It's my community. And for me to be standing here talking to you guys, that takes a lot of courage on my behalf. And I'm sorry, and that's because of this program right here and these women. Thanks.
I would respectfully ask the gallery please to refrain from clapping, or that's part of our policy. Councilor Campbell.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody on council that denies that there's a need in this community. We recognize that there's a need. We know that we need to, we don't know how to fix it. There isn't a ready answer, and we're dealing with the powers that be that can try to put the resources together to help us make this work. We've reached out to the province in many different aspects, and we are working with the groups to try and find a solution. Right now, there isn't one. I know what's going out there right now. It says the city is kicking them out in the middle of the winter. Well, I think that's a bit of a misconception, because the notice came 6 months ago. And what I find disappointing is that there hasn't been a contingency plan on either part, a backup plan. Now, I understand that Beth's is going to be taken care of. We've heard it through our CAO, directly from BC Housing, that there's money available to put the homeless into motels. So hopefully that's going to come through, because I know that that's an absolute need. We need to get people off the streets, and we can't have them out in the snow. I'm disappointed that, and I know that we certainly need the gathering place. We need a soup kitchen. We need the Whispers. We need the services that they provide. We can't have it there. And I'm disappointed that they haven't been working with other agencies or other groups to form a plan B. What are we going to do when we leave? Can we move in and work with the Gospel Chapel? Can we get the Christian Center involved? Can we get some of the other church groups involved? Can we have different days, rotating kitchens? Because we know that the churches usually all have kitchens. So I don't know what's been put into a plan B, but we're not making a decision now to throw you out. The decision was made last summer. And I know we're talking about the disenfranchised, and I know that there's people out there that definitely need our help. And I hate to see people slipping through the cracks. But the other aspect of our job is, and it's a much larger majority, is to protect the rest of the community. And we have had such a strong voice from the balance of the community to say, please do not allow this facility to continue where it is. We are creating too many victims in this downtown core. We've had too many businesses damaged, vandalized, and theft. We have business people that are broken because they have been violated, because of the break-ins, because of the robberies to support drug addicts. And we can't say it's your fault that this is happening, but in the location where it's happening right now, it's attracting them into this area, which is creating a bigger problem for the residents and the business owners downtown. So it would be nice if we had solutions to fix all of this, if there was the proper counseling out there, if there was the proper outreach, and I know that this is being worked on. It's not there yet. But if there's another option after 6 months, like it's been 5 months now, that you could have worked with even temporary solutions until you find a permanent. We're not saying shut down these services. We know that the services are required. We're just saying that they can't be operated out of the city building anymore. So it's up to you, and we support what you do, but it's up to you to find a place to do it that isn't involving the city building that needs to come down.
In the first row.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our CAO, the issue of liability and insurance and who's responsible if something happens seems to be one of the central issues here today. So through you.
Let me just, can you identify yourself?
Oh, Kate for the Gazette. Sorry.
We know who you are, but for the record.
Yes, for the record. So that seems to be one of the central issues here. So through you to the CAO, who can perhaps answer about the lease. I don't have it in front of me, but for instance, Gallery 2, when they have a liquor event, has to come before the city, request a liquor license, and one of the clauses, there's one on the agenda tonight, for instance, that says the city must be named as a third-party liability on that insurance. Yeah. So is that not standard in all city-issued leases? So would the city be named as, on Whispers insurance to protect if something happens? And further to that, it has been mentioned that counselors, like Councillor Thompson, for instance, said personal liability for counselors if they allow this to go forward and something happens. does council not have insurance to protect against that?
Where's the,
Your worship, so as far as a lease agreement goes, there are certain clauses that go into the lease agreement, and it would be pretty much the same as any other tenant-landlord lease agreement, where a tenant has their own insurance that looks after the contents of what they have. As a landlord, we have the responsibility to make sure that when they've had a occupancy piece, that the city is satisfied that at that point in time, everything is kosher and correct. As far as liabilities from what Whispers and Beth have, it would likely not help out the city's piece should something happen, because they would have it only on their own pieces, and that's, like, I really seriously doubt if they have anything that says that it's city harmless. And again, as I believe Councillor Krog pointed out, it doesn't preclude when there is something as a significant accident that should happen. They will go, whoever it is that the incident happens to, or whoever's connected to that, it does come back after the pockets. And so your liabilities and different things are a little bit not codependent, they're totally separate. As a part of answering as far as the gallery goes, when they're looking for something to do for a deal, we do not issue a liquor permit. That is done through the liquor board, and I believe in concert with the RCMP, who provides that piece. What the city does is, because they are asking to serve liquor in a city-owned property, they come to council, and that is council purveyance whether or not they allow that. But it's all contingent on getting permits. They just don't go there and say, oh, council, we're gonna have a great big party. And, the chips fall where they may. There's certain things that have to be done in place, and they have to have serving right. They have to be able to have the ways and means of advising if there's somebody that has, say, over-imbibed or whatever, that it would be no different than somebody that has liquor that they're selling in the bar, that they have a responsibility to not serve those individuals anymore. So I hope that answers.
Well, that was
as far as the elected officials, there is an indemnification program in place, but always bear in mind, if that is acted upon, it still conveys back as legal costs to the corporation, i.e. the taxpayers. It still goes full circle, always. Councillors are protected, but who's gonna pay for it? Corporation, which in turn is everyone out there.
okay. So follow up, if I may. So Gallery 2 was brought up as an example by one of the councillors. So yes, I understand that the city doesn't issue the liquor permit, but there's that clause in whatever appears on the agenda that says you must name the city as an insured on the policy that they take out. So am I to understand that nothing similar would exist for Whispers of Hope? Like, that comparison was already made during this meeting. So nothing exists like that.
Because tenant insurance is just public liability, not on the building. Councilor Thompson?
This discussion is, I think it's been good. It's gotten a lot of things out, and people know where they stand. But one comment I have to make is that people are concerned about the homeless and shelter. And so I think it was announced that the city and Beth had come to terms on a preferred location for Beth's to build their new shelter. I am aware that there is a petition that has been put out. And it's interesting to see some of the signatories on that petition. Some of them are sitting in this room, and it's NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I just find that rather an interesting piece of information. I thought, okay, you don't want them in your backyard, but it's okay for your neighbors to have them there. So just a comment.
To the front row, and then the gentleman in the back. He's ahead of you. Just 1 second, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of want to just comment on something that Councillor Hammett had brought up. And I hopefully that reinforces the underlying need here isn't just that we need a little bit more time to work out a plan, but that we need to strengthen our communication lines with council. One thing I tried to convey was that we did have options available to us, just not very good ones. We kind of have plan A through Z worked out as to if this, then that, because there are so many variables at play here. We are working with other agencies, both in the capacity of looking for a location to operate in together, or perhaps even to rent or use facilities from. So this is, again, something we're having to reiterate. But unfortunately, when these conversations are a public conversation and we're trying to hash out concerns via Facebook pages or in the final hour when called upon, we can be looking into these liability issues. We can be looking into whether permits were in place, who did what, when we're actually appropriately confronted with these issues. I'm confident that our organization could overcome any obstacle put in front of its way and do so in a safe manner, and one that does respect our taxpayers and the risks that they also have out there in these decisions. So in allowing us some more time in rescinding the eviction notice, I suppose we want a confirmation that we're not really doing anything wrong. We've brought forward the fact that maybe this isn't a social issue, maybe it is. When we look at timelines and we see the notice that we were given in August with the stipulations being made, they were very social issues at that time. There wasn't necessarily concrete evidence, and a lot of these things were very vague, so we had to work with what we were given. And as much as there's misinformation on the council and the city side as to what's being gathered, what's being discussed, the same thing is happening for us. And I'm sure you all know how difficult it is to deal with public relations and misinformation and trying to validate your position that you're actually doing your best to do your job. So I think really in the end, we both come from very similar positions and we have very similar needs. So I really hope that regardless of the decisions made today, we shall overcome, but hopefully we're able to strengthen this relationship, because whether it be the city and a nonprofit organization or a landlord and a tenant, there needs to be a lot more communication going on there in order to have a healthy relationship. And I hope we can do that. So thank you.
Gentleman in the second row.
How's that task force going?
No, you're not in the second row, sorry.
Oh, am I in second row?
Yeah, you're in the second row, or first row, actually, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My reply to Councillor Thompson. First of all, I'm very disappointed that you made that remark about signing that petition. You know very well the background that my wife and I have in helping the needy. So when you saw that signature of ours, why didn't you come and ask us? Because you know our feelings for the needy. The reasons that we signed it, number one, as you are aware of, and Councillor Krog, that lot that city has on that corner was obtained years ago in case there was a change in traffic pattern because it is near the industrial area. Number two, at times it is one of the highest traffic patterns there, and according to the council, the people that use beds, they're nothing but drug addicts. So when they're under the influence of drugs, they wander out on the street, and the way some of those logging trucks and chip trucks come roaring through there, they're liable to get killed. Is that maybe the reason you done it? To get rid of the homeless population?
Jesus.
I have to respond to that. I didn't mention anybody's name.
No, I know you did, but you sure were looking at me.
For you to make a statement of that nature is reprehensible. Not only to me, but to those who sit at this table and who are in support of that. And I would like to ask you for an apology on that. I think it was totally uncalled for.
I don't think an apology is necessary. You didn't apologize either. And another thing, I've heard so much about liability here what about the city's liability for letting North Rockwell flood last spring? Other years, other councils have brought in a pump and kept the water down. This, where is your compassion for your taxpayers?
That's operational, and council doesn't get involved in the operations of staff management.
I just have one quick comment on that statement that you made, where you said that in that location it would be, and I quote, full of drug addicts, which I believe Beth would take a little bit of offense to that, considering they consider their organization drug-free, or they do not condone using drugs within the organization. Am I correct?
Yes, Mr.
I'm sorry, for what? Answer, I don't know, we on the second word, which I'm worried. Just, first, yes, most of the application was for some checks in order to get rid of the drivers. I was thinking that let's come to the city with that proposal, with that location, and ask the city to follow that. The city's suggestion to say, you didn't have this land, put your ownership or own property. They can't ask them ask us for that property. So I just want to clarify that, because this is discuss around town, you know, we said yes, we would be back to. So, what happened to us over the past 6 months, they got 10% of their situation. I would fix the situation, and we've been working on that, and that's so far, the best statement like that is pretty responsible. I would just like to say to everyone, you are kind of running reading, right? It is a passionate subject, and again, I must commend everybody in the gallery for how respectfully this meeting is going, considering the nature of this topic. But if you can, please, let's try to speed it up, because we do have a long day. Was asking for an extension or renewal of the eviction so that we can start until the floors of the original mix. And so that was one thing. The other thing is it possible now that we are right around, it's been confirmed officially, that there is photos taken in July, etc. But we as a gallery see these photos? Can we witness these photos? It's not in our position to say whether this is to close or not. Why is it even our building inspectors? Why to say that? We only find it suspicious because of the way it's done, because in a commercial building it should probably not be done this way. If you have any jurisdiction, would be the electrical safety board. But now taking these individuals into this, they will definitely then make this fiber optical, which will not only be discovering, but anything else in the premise. If your house need a 20-amp trailer plug, which they do have a code, yes, I can certify you that being in the industry, I know that. this will have to be changed. We're talking thousands of dollars now because this is coming to the surface. What is the operations cost? I'm just making that again because it's becoming so operational. We shouldn't be dealing with this now anymore. Right? It's trying to avoid the whole
First off, my apologies to former Mayor Jake Raven for jumping on this opportunity to speak there. My question was about the task force that was said to, in the summertime, you said you were starting a task force for this. I'm just curious, has that happened out there and what's it doing? Is it involved in any of these smart operations? It's not. It's not. It's not. Morphed into other groups that are working together. Okay, so three people are bouncing together and it's all that committee as well. Okay, working to the same goal, but it's okay to say, okay, just let people know when we talk about task force, that's really what's happening. So.
There wasn't any serious intent and initiative to be to the gentleman in the pictures again. Looks like the exit sign went down the road. When somebody found out off of the exit sign, which does not pass code. I'm not sure what that was. The next one, please. This one here I can't speak on. Believe this can speak on this. Regards to the occupancy side. It would be acceptable to urban residents as long as it's about 8 feet. Yes, it's fully acceptable to use Linux in a residential area, but not commercial. Exactly. Or private. That was correct. So, Mr. President, would you like to comment on No, sir. Thank you.
Suggestion if I could. As a taxpayer, for information.
Yes, sir.
I'm Scott Davis.
Yes.
Okay. We're concerned with this conversation for, the passion of what's going on. And the solution and as a taxpayer would be for a situation for you. If somebody else in this town doesn't have our books go there and stand first across this way, then take care of it. And let us people stay until this is out. So this makes these people put them on the street because you're going to create more problems than they experience at this point in time. And forget, everybody in this room knows it. That's all I have to say.
Well, the boards cannot address the boards would not be able to address it because it has to be a certified electrician. If they have a certified electrician, make a statement of public works. We just can't send anybody in there touching the electrical room. If they touch it down,
It just seems like it would be distracting to have another presentation and then get back into this discussion again. I'm not sure if that was done for a reason or not. Your worship, it just fell under the item section as for our procedure as well as the tax. Organizations and larger community working together agency models for the last couple of years, which is really a lot of different people and talking about it. And the last one, for whatever reason, I will speak to as I include, teachers and lots of subjects, but they were not that spearheaded or created or developed the meeting. Now I meeting to become experts. And then this does work exactly, but we're going to have agency group government, and then we brought it to our purposes of area development. We're not opposed to a subcommittee. Others are not a subcommittee formed, so this is a task force. Just so we're aware.
Yeah, that was not the intent when we made that statement that this was going to be the task force that we were talking about. Just so you're aware, but that was not the intention. This was one of the organizations that is also participating in this overall bigger picture that we're dealing with. All those in favor of receipt? Anyone opposed? So carried.
Motion for the order of the agenda and move item 5A up to 3C.
3C to 3D. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Discussion. Discussion. Thank you for your presentation. Thank everyone for being respectful in this meeting, but we're going to be discussion on the last. Moving up the thing, I would moving it up after shortly. After B. I'm sure that's the appropriate discussion. Number 3C. That would be the notice of motion. The recommendation is whereas Bets and Whispers of Hope continue to provide food and shelter to many people in our community, and all agencies are in the process of actively seeking new locations in which to operate and have been successful. And part of that is, which cannot be made a decision on, the recommendation is that council extended time in which council is appropriating a location will be the first 2018 and that would be required another motion, another resolution. So we are receiving the notice of motion. We're worded wrong.
No, how is it worded wrong? So therefore, the resolved is, how is it worded wrong?
Well, I'm seeing the notice of motion. I'm not questioning that the actual recommendations were wrong because we will make a decision at the beginning of the meeting. So it has to be referred, so that we're receiving the notice of motion.
I would want to receive and refer to the regular. I second that.
Yeah, you second. Okay.
I think I have to follow this to next meeting if you don't want to.
That's a motion that refers to the amendment or the motion to refer to a later meeting.
I think that's the motion on the floor.
Right.
I think there's so much discussion, and I think there needs to be a decision made for one or the other.
So I'm just confused, because if we have with us to tonight's meeting and it just falls off, I just thought that for the sake of the hour, everybody's here right now, probably expecting a decision, they're going to I'm sure most people want to come back tonight and get it spoken to, so I just thought deal with it now, but we're going to make it come back to me.
Can't do any decisions on any of so.
No, it's not just.
Well, the same on the second part of the notice. Councilor
Yeah, I just, some additional information came forward over the break there. I don't know if this is something that's possible, but it was suggested that there might be a provincial electrical inspector or maybe safety commissioner that could be called in, could be asked to come and inspect the property. And so if they were coming in to inspect the property, that would absolve us of our liability because we are asking for this to be done. And then we need to extend they will be taking care of that. And then if we extend this to give them a bit more time, we'd be able to move forward without any liability to the city.
Have the liability and the responsibility to correct everything and anything and bring it up to speed, which again will substantiate huge costs.
And what if they were out by then? What if they were out by then? What is that?
The building is not being used and empty, then there is no usage, so that does not fall under any parameters of any kind of upgrade to the electrical.
With respect? This came out like more of the bottom, has a version, which I and then this contract's going to
Thank you, Madam President. There was a bit of a deviation, so yes. Discussion. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. It will be an evening meeting. Yeah, that's the item.
which becomes all in favor to receive? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you. Moving on to provisional copies of all of these.